Hey there, Games Apprentice back with another Evercade video, and this week I'm going to be looking at the Piko Collection 1. Is it a collection worthy of immortality, or is it just a bunch of tap from the bargain bins? Let's find out. Now this video has been long overdue. I've been playing this collection for months, but with 20 games and a lot of RPGs on this one, it's taken me a while to get through them all. Anyway, hopefully it's been worth the wait. Here they are ranked from worst to best. This was the first game that I played on here where I had to question if I was just wasting my life by capturing footage of it. This is definitely a strong case of box art selling a game. I thought I was in for some amazing 16-bit action platformer, but this is by far the worst game on this collection. I didn't even have to finish playing the other games on this collection to know that, as it's one of the worst games I've ever played. When I saw how poor the graphics were for a 16-bit action platformer, I assumed all the power had gone into the gameplay, but that's awful too. Jumping is painful, fighting enemies is just... I don't have the words. Punches barely feel like they're landing. You can hold down the attack button to power up your attack, which releases the measliest looking kick I've ever seen. The level design is unnecessarily confusing. It's like they tried to make up for the lack of fun gameplay by just making things a bit maze-like to give you something to do, I guess. Mind-numbingly dull is the politest way to describe this one. In the futuristic year of 2006, you're boxing aliens. This game is basically Punch-Out with aliens, except you can also do training. The training bit seems more like a mini-game as it's from a different angle, so it doesn't really teach you any skills. You just do it to presumably increase your stats. The main game itself definitely has a much steeper learning curve than Punch-Out. The enemies hit hard, and any tell they've got about what punch they're throwing is much less obvious. The graphics are terrible too, considering this came out 5 years after Punch-Out. There are some rumours floating around that this was meant to be Punch-Out 2 initially, but got canned by Nintendo after Mike Tyson got in trouble. But it's just so much poorer than Punch-Out in every way that doesn't seem likely. I guess Way of the Exploding Fist is a strategic fighter. There's not really much to it, and the AI is really dumb and doesn't seem to realise if you just spam the same attack over and over. It doesn't look great. It feels like this one might be okay in a 2-player mode, but I'm not going to waste any of my friends' time attempting to play this piece of garbage, to be honest. One of the most horrible moments of my life was when I couldn't find the gym power footage and thought I'd have to recapture it. Luckily it showed up and I never have to play this rotten game again. First off, I've got to address the box art. That is some downright awful box art, but it can't begin to prepare you for what's to come. The game is an action platformer, and for some reason they went with the art style of having the background move forward when the foreground moves backwards. This just absolutely split my mind and stomach in two. If you can try not to focus on the background, you might get a bit further without needing to lay down. Aside from that, the gameplay isn't particularly good. If anything touches you, you're dead, which is the last thing you want when you're experiencing the world's worst hangover. Play at your own risk. This game is one of those 16-bit mascot platformers that were incredibly popular to make on the Sega Mega Drive and the Super Nintendo. It's a pretty colourful game with some nice looking sprites, and that's about where the positive ends, if that's even classed as being positive. The control layout for this one is awful. Run is Y and jump is A, which are clearly too far apart to press with your thumb, and you need to run and jump quite a lot. The level design is atrocious. Other than the odd signed arrow, there's not really any indication of where you're meant to go or what you're meant to do, and most frustratingly, you can get stuck and you just have to wait and die. The sound effects are annoying, as is the incredibly slow climb when you get to the edge of a ledge. Everything about it just feels naff. Just rewatching it right now is pissing me right off. Don't play this game. This one is basically like the early Castlevania games, and spoiler, I hate the early Castlevania games. A NES hack and slash platformer definitely isn't going to be something that I can recommend playing in 2023. I thought they were bad then, and they're even worse now. If you like those sort of games, maybe you like this one. It seems equally dull, clunky and rubbish as the rest of them. The music's okay, I guess. Enjoy that compliment, 8 Eyes. Clearly the makers of this game were told that they needed to put a dinosaur on a skateboard, and that was the end of their design brief. As the box is a dinosaur with a skateboard, and sure enough, so do the levels. However, the skateboarding sections are mostly just pointless transitions that look cool, but then you've got to go back to the rubbish platforming. Rex can jump, and it can also breathe fire. If you breathe fire at an enemy enough times, it will freeze it. I guess they didn't want kids enjoying a nice bit of fiery murder. The camera is really zoomed in, I guess so you can enjoy seeing a big cutesy dinosaur sprite, but it's at the detriment of the level itself. It's hard to see what's going on, as with the colour scheme and flies constantly buzzing around you, like flies around shit. Most stuff doesn't kill you straight away, which is always nice, but spikes do, and they hide them everywhere. There's certainly nothing radical about Rex, but I guess no one would have bought rubbish Rex, and that's what they got though. Draken is a weird game. When I first fired it up, I was wowed by its amazing graphics. Clearly I'd been playing older retro games too long by that point. It basically consists of you walking around the world in this weird first-person mode with poor draw distance, and then having random fights. When it comes to the fights, you don't control them, you're giving your character orders, but beyond that, they're on their own. The random battles themselves are annoying as hell. I had one bit where I went the wrong way and needed to turn around. Slowly turning around on that spot 180 degrees put me in 3 separate random battles. Most of the time, the game feels like a walking simulator as you've got so little actual input. I'm glad it's on here, as I'd never seen anything like it before, until later on this Evercade review anyway. Admittedly, I wasn't looking forward to playing The Immortal again. The Immortal was one of 2 games on this collection that I'd played previously. As a kid, I hated The Immortal. I could never figure out where to go. I was always dying, and I didn't really understand what the battle mechanics were. I just moved the D-pad about, and D-pad, that's not a thing. I just moved the D-pad about and hoped for the best. In 30 years, things still haven't changed. I still don't like The Immortal, I still don't understand the battle mechanics, but at least now I can appreciate it a little. It's an action-adventure game where you pick up objects, fight enemies, and avoid traps, of which there are loads of. The objects you find will help you safely navigate the dungeon or progress to the next area. The highlight of the game is still the same as it always was, smacking an enemy in the head and his head exploding. Aside from its steep learning curve, navigating your inventory is annoying, as is navigating the isometric controls with an Evercade controller, especially when you're trying to subtly manoeuvre around traps. I remember this one reviewing really well, but it's just not my game. Have you played this one? Did you like it? Let me know in the comments. This was the other game that I had growing up. I had this one on PC, but I never really played that much of it. I guess the most famous game that it's similar to is Lemmings, except you get a lot more direct control over each of your humans, and there are a lot less of them. You basically need to work out each level's puzzle using whatever tools and humans that level offers you. All the humans have the same abilities, they can pick up and become climbable. The tools give you extra abilities, such as the spear, which lets you jump. You can also find out how hard our ancestors had it, as if this game's anything to go by, passing your spear to your friend often ends in accidental death. The game is fun and challenging, if not a little on the slow side. It'd be nice if the humans had invented a run button. The controls can be a little fiddly and you can't cancel out of actions, which is very annoying. The levels are also pretty punishing in that there's definitely a wrong way to do them. If you take a wrong turn or accidentally throw your spear out, then you pretty much have to restart the game. There are level codes, which mean you can at least get back into the level, but it's a pain in the ass having to do that every time. Another mascot platformer now. This one you play a robot, presumably called Tinhead. It's a fairly standard platformer. You can jump and shoot. You can also switch between what direction your bombs fire, either straight forward, diagonal, or small arcing. They've also got a bit of bounce on them, making it easy to clear lots of enemies out at once. The level design doesn't appear to be completely linear. I'm not a huge fan of the colour scheme on the early levels though. Still, it doesn't do a lot wrong, it just lacks a bit of invention. Top Racer is a fairly standard racer, which fits in well with this collection as it adds some variety. It's a fun game that has a split screen even in single player, but at least you can pretend you've got a friend playing with you. It's a simple arcade racer with no bells and whistles. The challenge is just hitting the corners at the right times and trying to get around the other cars, as well as timing your nitros at the right points. You generally don't ever have to slow down unless you use your nitro going into a corner. The music is great and there's a real sense of speed about this one. This is a good game, I liked it. Playing Magical Girl was the most relaxed I've felt in ages. Unlike a lot of shooters, you get a generous health bar instead of insta-death, which is great because it's hard to see what's going on half the time because it's so chaotic. But I can assure you what's going on is some crazy drug-induced dream. It's colourful and none of the enemies resemble anything but weirdness. I completely spaced out for most of this one to the sound of the Magical Girl shooting. Check it out and enjoy the fused state that you experience while playing this game. This one's a point-and-click adventure game that also has a little bit of combat and death to it. I'm not usually a fan of point-and-click adventure games where you can die, but it does add to the tension in this game, especially the death screen, which gives you an extra puzzle to solve to save yourself. It's got some good atmospheric tunes and plenty of places to explore. The lack of colour is always a bit disappointing in adventure games like this, but the premise and story all make it work. The controls take some time getting used to. I'd much rather have played it with a mouse, but once you get the hang of it, it's not too bad. Dragon View is basically what Draken could have been like with a few better ideas. There's no random battles, so you can easily avoid trouble most of the time if you need to, and the battles are made up of action platforming rather than just observing. Like in Draken, the overworld looks awful, and any time you've got to explore just isn't good. The draw distance means it's hard to find anything, and a lot of the time you don't know where you're going anywhere. The story is interesting though, and the dialogue is well written. While the combat isn't amazing, it's still pretty good for what's mainly an RPG game. It's a pretty tough game, and you'll want to use save states a lot so you're not backtracking constantly, but it's a decent game for this collection and feels at home on the handheld Evercade. This one is a pretty fun Streets of Rage Final Fight clone. It looks great, especially the items in the foreground, and just look at this street lamp. Fantastic street lamp, right? The music is pretty decent, and the sound effects pack a satisfactory punch. The weapons have got some cool animations, as do quite a few of the moves. Really the only thing that lets this one down is that you've no run, block or back attack, meaning that when you get surrounded, which happens frequently, you can't do a great deal about it. Still, if you're a fan of this genre, I think you'll have a good time with it. I did. First off, what a stupid name for a game. The name combined with the fact that it's basically a Golden Axe clone were enough to drop my expectations right down. as I personally can't stand Golden Axe. To my surprise though, I really enjoyed this one. It's a lot more forgiving than Golden Axe, and I really like the art style that reminded me of something like Fire Emblem. If you've never played this or Golden Axe, it's basically a side-scrolling brawler where you pick up magic that you can use to take out everything on the screen. Personally, I think it improves on Golden Axe in every way other than that you don't have a little lizard to ride on. Another action platformer. I had low expectations for this one, but I was pleasantly surprised. I really enjoyed this one, it was a lot of fun. It reminded me of Aladdin and Earthworm Jim, but without the grueling difficulty. It looks good, the levels are big, there's loads of places to go, and platforming and the combat are both fun. It was refreshing to play a platformer on the Evercade that was fun without being too trying. Out of all the games on here, Canon was the one I was most looking forward to playing. One of my all-time favourite series is Fire Emblem, and strategic RPGs are perfect for any handheld console. If you've never played a strategic RPG before, this is basically a grid-based, turn-based game. You can move a certain distance on your turn, and then you've got the option to either attack, defend, use an item, or use a spell, controlling multiple characters as the game progresses. This particular one's a bit grindy. In some ways, that's better for newcomers to these sorts of games, because dying doesn't really matter, as you can continue from the start of the level with all the experience you earn. But on the other hand, it means that the levels tend to be designed that way, so you've got to die multiple times to be powerful enough to be able to beat them. This can get very repetitive. The fun in these sorts of games is the strategy behind it, not just moving and attacking over and over. It doesn't remotely have the depth of something like Fire Emblem, but still it's a pretty good strategic RPG that'll scratch that itch until they sign up something like Tactics Ogre or Shining Force on the Evercade. Never gonna happen. My Evercade Gem of the Week goes to easily the best game on this cart, Brave Battle Saga. This is a JRPG that, although it looks very Super Nintendo, I believe it actually came out on the Sega Mega Drive. It's colourful, got decent music, and feels like most Super Nintendo RPGs. You basically play some kid who gets banished from his clan, which leads you and your friends on a spiraling adventure. Battles are turn-based, although not random encounters, which is always refreshing for a 16-bit JRPG. That being said, it is very grindy. You have to fight a lot more enemies than is natural to be at the right level to progress, particularly early in the game. Luckily, transitions in and out of battles are pretty quick. If you like JRPGs or you've never bothered to try one, now's your chance. This is a great game. When I first saw that there were 20 games on this one, and the only ones I'd heard of were The Humans and The Immortal, I didn't have very high hopes for it. I figured this one was just going to be full of garbage, and clearly I was pleasantly surprised because there's some quality titles, there are some garbage, but that's kind of what I want. I want bits of both. I want to have a laugh at some games' expense, but I also want to enjoy some games as well, and that's exactly what this one's done. The Piko Collection one is hands down the best Evercade cart that I've played so far. Now I know I've been quite harsh with some of my previous reviews, but that's because I'd played this one already. I was just trying to finish it off, and I knew that this one set the bar. For the quality, the quantity, the Piko Collection one scores a perfect 10 out of 10. As always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like the video and click subscribe if you want to see more of my Evercade videos. I'll catch you next time.